Humid this afternoon, clouds and sunshine, a high of 84. Currently, 69 degrees. Your next news update is at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by CharlesEquipment.com, keeping you powered up no matter what the conditions.
Tickets for Freedom Summit Chicago are on sale now at freedomsummitchicago.com. That's freedomsummitchicago.com.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So you've got a couple of camps. Of course, you have President Trump and his loyalists who suggest the whole impeachment inquiry over the Ukraine phone call and then the handling of the phone call is just the latest witch hunt. You've got Democrats that are have these offerings for impeachment. If you don't like these, they have others, but they are ends justify the means on impeachment. And then you have those that are trying to temper the excesses of the left, like Obama's favorite Republican, New York Times columnist David Brooks. On PBS NewsHour over the weekend, Brooks had this assessment of the substantive case for impeachment and then the politics of impeachment.
The decision to do impeachment is a mistake. I do agree Trump did something impeachable, but this is a political process, not a legal process. There's no obligation to prosecute. And to me, it's a mistake for a couple of reasons. If your object is to get Donald Trump out of the White House, impeachment does not get you there. Because the chance that you will get 20 Republican senators to vote Donald Trump out of office seems to me so remote, it's minuscule. So the likely outcome of this is that Donald Trump will say, see, I was acquitted in the Senate. I've vindicated, I beat these people. And so he'll get a little victory, and then both parties will go into revolt. And so that's the way it likely looks to end up. In the meantime, you're trampling over your Democratic primary season. You're not having the debate the voters want, which is about climate change and health care and jobs and stuff like that. You're focusing all the attention on the Democratic side, or the bulk of it, to the Congress, not to the presidential candidates. And to me, so what Pelosi's done, I think, here is taken a decision that has a very low chance of succeeding to get him out of office, but has huge risks in ways we can't even imagine. And so I'm a little nervous about where impeachment is going to get us.
Mm-hmm. I don't agree that Trump has committed an impeachable offense, but I do otherwise agree with David Brooks's analysis. And this is, frankly, why, as sort of embarrassing the blemish that it would leave on Trump's record, I can understand why he doesn't want to be impeached. But in terms of Machiavellian political calculations, there's a lot more potential upside for him than there is for Pelosi and company, unless you have Republicans decide to commit mass political Harry Carey, and roll in the Senate. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Jim DeMint, former U.S. Senator, of course, South Carolina, former president of the Heritage Foundation, now chairman of the Conservative Partnership Institute, and he's got a new book out. The new book, Conservative: Knowing What to Keep, in which, among other topics, he and his co-author Rachel Bovard assess and provide insight into the rise of both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump as political forces. Jim, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, it's good to be with you. Hello, Chicago.
And so, give us your handle on the last 5 days. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, but how you sort of sum up the politics of impeachment at this point.
Well, Dan, it's hard to take the impeachment idea seriously after the Democrats have been talking about it since before the inauguration. It's like almost every week they're looking for something that they can start this impeachment inquiry. And, of course, they did a couple of years with the Russia collusion. Now they found something else. And when I read the transcripts of what the president said, it's completely benign, particularly if you know the background that they're trying to clean up the corruption in Ukraine. The new Ukrainian president was basically asking Trump if they could continue to look into that. The president is asking the president of Ukraine to help with finding out what happened in 2016. But you know all that. But the politics of this is, I think it's damaging to the country, and because I think people less and less are taking Congress seriously politically. They don't know what to believe, so they don't believe either side. Here, the language is so hyperbolic and vicious in a lot of ways. It hurts to look in as a citizen, and particularly as a former senator, to see how the process is just completely broken down. And they're not talking about the real issues, I think, as you mentioned before, that are important to the country, that we should be talking about in an election. The distance between what the Democrats and Republicans, the left and the right, that distance now is larger than it's ever been. That's why we wrote the book, Conservative, Knowing What to Keep. We can't lead a conservative movement if we don't know what we're trying to conserve, and if we don't know what the motivation of the left is. And I think if people understand that motivation, they would see why this impeachment is so important.
Well, President Trump, I mean, he's trying to fight back as best he can. He released a new Twitter video, declaring that this is just pretty much a witch hunt. Do you think he's going about this the right way, and how should the White House be fighting back?
Well, it's hard for him to do it the right way, because I think it's unprecedented that the president can't make a phone call with a foreign leader without it being leaked and misrepresented. I don't even think, if you know the law here, that there's such thing as a whistleblower who only has secondhand information. And just imagine being president if you know that you can't make a call without somehow it being twisted and leaked. So he knows that so many of the people around him in the Justice Department, intelligence agencies, and in the White House itself are trying to undermine him. So I think this has gotten to him in a different way. Not that he feels threatened by the substance, but I think he just he realizes that the environment he's working in is trying to undermine him. And a lot of people complain about how he responds, but mostly he is responding. He doesn't really go out and attack people who are not attacking him. He's a counterpuncher, and I don't do it that way. I'm much less aggressive than Trump. But the fact is, for what he's dealing with, his personality, his style is perfect for the swamp, because it is a mean, ugly place. And you can't mud wrestle without getting mud on you. And so as I look at what he's doing, there is just no elegant way to deal with the things he's dealing with.
Well, right, and that's obvious on the left. It's less obvious, but just as serious with some on the Republican side of the aisle, too. I mean, I have to say, I'm a little exacerbated by the reactions and some of the comments of Republicans like Mitt Romney, Republicans like Adam Kinzinger criticizing Trump's retweeting of Pastor Jeffries over the weekend about concern over a civil war if this president was illegitimately removed from office. And I think about people that are tweeting about the president and sort of patriotic tones. Meanwhile, these are the same people who voted for the sort of spending bills that have this country $20 trillion plus in debt, really about $100 trillion in debt if you include unfunded liabilities. And so this to me goes back to your book, Conservative, Knowing What to Keep. And we're so consumed with personality politics that Republicans and conservatives, maybe in part, some of them at least, have lost sight of what conservatives are supposed to do from a governing perspective.
Exactly. I mean, just like when we're talking about the gun violence, my comment there was a lot of the violence is actually being created by our leadership and what people, and not only in Washington, are saying, but in the media and entertainment. They're just fomenting all this division across our country. I'm not sure our politicians know what they're doing to America. If you travel a lot like I do, people get along just fine. People of different races and genders and everything. But all of this is coming from the language in the media now, and it really concerns me that we're tearing our country apart, and it's not because the people are divided or don't like each other. We all work together and go to school together, play sports together. But our politics has gotten vicious and very divisive, and there's a reason for that, and that's why we've spent several years researching really what it is the left is trying to do, what their motivation is, and what it is that we're trying to keep as conservatives that make this country great. that make it peaceful and civil. And if folks know that, I think it's going to make a difference over time, because we're going to have to win the battle outside of Washington. And so the people are going to have to come together, our civil leaders who are not elected leaders. Frankly, Dan and Amy, I feel like I can do a lot more on the outside than I did in the Senate, just because there's just not anything of substance going on there. You mentioned the debt, nearly $23 trillion. Social Security, Medicare are both broke. We've got serious problems of infrastructure across the country. These things can be dealt with, but not if we're spending all this time crying wolf on things like impeachment. So I'm a little bit disgusted right now, and I hope as we have a chance to talk about what we want to keep around the country, that it'll bring people to a kind of a different perspective of what we need to work on.
Do people need to understand, though? I mean, here's my assessment. You can agree or disagree, but my assessment that the swamp and translating what that means. So what you have is both sides sort of spending all their time to vilify the other side, because we're sort of in this negative partisanship dynamic. And the reason is because that moves numbers or whips up the base. And it also covers for the fact that most members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, actually agree on the policy. They actually agree with expanding government. They actually agree with spending beyond our means. They actually have a government-centric view of the world. And that's what they don't want people to recognize, think about, actually address.
Dan, I'm afraid you're right. And it's widespread across the Democrat Party, and I'm afraid there are a lot of Republicans who are just happy to keep spending, because that's where all the bipartisanship is. That's how you can't get $23 trillion in debt without bipartisan spending. And that's the kind of the quid pro quo we've got going in Washington now. The Republicans get what they want for military and other things, and the Democrats get what they want for all their welfare and social spending programs, and the budget just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And one day it's all going to collapse, and none of these guys are going to take the blame for it. They're going to say it happened to whoever happened to be president, just like Bush got blamed for the big crash, but the subprime mortgage thing started long before he got in office.
And now, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about conservatives that our children, that the youth are being taught?
Well, they're being taught that conservatives are hateful and bigoted, mostly just because they believe something. But I think people will be surprised as they read the book, and a lot of this is just brought forward from Russell Kirk, who wrote The Conservative Mind 60 years ago, is for people to find out that conservatives are the ones who celebrate and promote real diversity, not diversity based on skin color or something else, but diversity based on what you believe and how you want to live. Conservatives believe in a Republican form of government. That means a devolved power, a federalist style where states have a lot of power. Conservatives believe in tradition, but we also believe in changing traditions that are not right, that are not consistent with our values and our Constitution. So the things that we want to keep would probably surprise people, and they're not policy, they're not politics, they're things that are essential to our culture. And I think people would also be surprised, and Dan hit on it, this idea of centralized power, which it brings into play this whole global governance, is really what the left, and I'm afraid some that are in the Republican Party, believe that that's what we do. These supranational groups like the European Union or the United Nations, a lot of people in this country are pushing towards that.
He is former United States Senator Jim DeMint, former head of the Heritage Foundation, now chairman of the Conservative Partnership Institute. His new book, pick it up, Conservative, Knowing What to Keep.